Welcome to the Helix webinar series. Today's session is on migrating from TSOM to BMC Helix Operations Management. So that's BHOM with AIOps. Joining and presenting today is Nilesh Deshpande, who will introduce himself formally when we get started. He's a principal product developer, and joining him in the team as panelists is Anand, Ipster, and Charles. They will be answering your questions during the session. We will roughly take around 50 minutes, so at least try to get 10 minutes of Q&A. But please do put your Q&A questions in the session, because we will get those answered during the event, and then any that we can take to the live Q&A at the end. You will remain muted because there's a lot to get covered today. We are recording this session and we will be sharing out the content after the event. So I'm now going to hand over to Nilesh to get us started and do his introduction. Over to you, Nilesh.
Hi everyone, my name is Nilesh Pandey. I am with BMC for past more than 20 years, been through the petrol, true site, and now I'm doing my journey on the BMC Helix. Today in my webinar, I'll be covering the migration from the TSOM to BHOM. And as Sam said, I have my colleagues with me as a panelist, Charles, Anand, and Ipsita. These are the contents that we'll be covering today. We will be talking about the value of BHOM. So it's not just the migration, it's the overall addition of your observability and the AIOps. And we'll be going through the migration process where we'll be covering the various constructs of the overall migration process, and we'll go through the details for some of them. And then we'll be cover the various tools and the resources that BMC has made you available for your migration journey. And in the end, we'll be going through the quick self-learning plan, some of the links that I'll be sharing, and also Samantha will be sharing that with you after the webinar. Throughout the webinar, I'm using 3 acronyms. You might be already aware of it, but I thought to call that out, which is the TSOM. This is the True Site Operations Management, BHOM, which is BMC Helix Operation Management, and AIOps is the AIOps, Artificial Intelligence for IT Operations, and that goes together. The BHOM and AIOps, they work together. And when we say this value of BHOM, note that it's when you do the migrate, you should consider both of them together, the BHOM and the AIOps. And that's the way you will be getting the maximum return on investment of the efforts being done on the migration. And then you will start the journey of the BMC Helix operation management with us. When you start, I thought to let's share some of the basic items which we're comparing with which we're having with the TSOM and compare that with the BHOM. The first one would be the installation technology. In TSOM, as you know, that it was the installer based, depending on the OS, Windows, Linux, you install the TSIM, TSPS, ISN, the necessary agents, and then it works together. Whereas in BHOM, there is a total different paradigm. It works with the latest cutting edge technologies. It's a fully integrated with cloud native, containerized microservice architecture. It makes use of the Kubernetes, Kafka, Victoria, everything that you know about the new containerized technology, it makes use of it. And that's how the installation technology is totally different. And for the SaaS support, TSOM didn't have an official SaaS support, where the BHOM AIOps, they are totally based on the SaaS. And we also provide the on-prem version of the deployment. If a customer want to deploy on their local data centers, if you have the expertise of setting up your own lab of the Kubernetes, then you can use the on-prem version. You can also deploy that on the public cloud like the AWS and Azure, which are the supported versions for the BHOM on-prem versions. For the scaling, in case of TSOM, if you know that if it exceeds the number of your instances, the devices or the attributes, ultimately you'll have to define a new stack with the TSPS and the TSIMs for it, which is not the case for the BHOM AIOps. As and when the data increases, then the resources can be added horizontally as per the servers, which will add up into the node on the Kubernetes cluster, and the scaling will work and your data collection will resume. The next one about the integrations. In TSOM, as you know, we have this minimal supported products which were developed to integrate with the TSOM, a direct integration. But in case of BHOM AIOps, it covers most of all the popular monitoring software. You take the the Dynatrace, Datadog, those all things can be integrated using the intelligent integration that we'll walk through in the next slides. And it also supports the open REST API calls, where any kind of integrations can be made possible for the BHOM AIOps. For the service model, it was done manually, mainly based on the CMDB, where in BHOM AIOps, we have something called as blueprint. So on click of that, when you have the necessary CIs detected, on click of the creation of the service model using the blueprint, the model just gets created very fast and easy, a very good feature. For the monitoring, in a case of TSOM, you had the CMA policies, which was covering the alarms and the monitoring both together. Whereas in BHOM AIOps, they are separated, and that gives a better clarity. Both has a different way of the implementation in the UI, and they are separated. For the event process, you had the mix of the policy and the rules which you are developing on the sell side. In BHOM AIOps, it's consolidated together into the whole process workflow diagramming. It's in the event policy. For the automation, you have the true site orchestration and the server automation part. In BHOM AIOps, this is done via our module, intelligent automation. And this gives a lot of options to do the automation. There are dedicated softwares for it, dedicated applications, and as well you have the generic connector where you can define your own automation based on the events. Let's talk about the capability comparison. We are not taking out anything which was there in TSOM. You'll get most of all the features that you were having the TSOM into the BHOM with some variation or the workaround, and some are very straightforward. The anomaly detection, behavior learning, dynamic baseline, monitoring event management, and the way the event noise reduction used to happen, these all carry forward in case of BHOM. The proactive notification based on the thresholds, we have the baselines as well as the statics thresholds, they are still there. The petrol agent, if you have that expertise and being used, that remains as it is in BHOM. It's fully supported. It also has the agentless collection if you want to make use of it. And the automated event management, that is the policies are there. We call it as the alarm policy when it happens in BHOM. And you get the similar functionality which was there in the TSOM. The event correlation that can happen using the static policy where you define the rules, as well as the BHOM AIOps also has its artificial intelligence being used, which will help us for the event correlation things. And this also helps into the next part, which is the probable cause analysis and service-centric monitoring. This slide talks about what a new value that being added in the capabilities comparing to the TSOM. I'll speak about the open integration first, where we have the intelligent integration being added, and it pulls most of the third-party metrics, the events and the topologies data into BHOM directly, and it's a streamed one, and it has more than 40 applications available for the integrations. For the DSM, we have the service modeling being defined using the blueprint that I explained. The GPT summaries is best action recommendation. They are the part of the event treatment. You get a very good representation of all the events with a more intelligence put in, which will help you to understand the root causes in a better way, and then you can relate those events together using those new features added. And they are all based on the AIML and the static rules all together to help you out to reduce your MTTR and help for a better event management. For the intelligent automation is the new integration that we have, where we can run multiple self-healing actions using the various supported third parties, like for example, Ansible. The Grafana based dashboard, this is a new technology. I'll be elaborating this more into the next slide. This is a replacement for the reporting. The elastic scalability, like is defined, is a horizontal scalable using the containers architecture. And the centralized data lake is the one where we have the multiple data being collected and stored that can be fetched up later into the dashboard using the centralized data lake. I am on the terminology comparison. I'll make one pause here so that you can go through the slide content, because this may be helpful for you to understand the difference. The TSPS, TSIM, ISN, they doesn't exist in BHOM as it is. So those are converted into the individual containerized microservices. Then they fit into that architecture. So if you have the on-prem container being deployed, then you'll be able to see how it works. Otherwise, it's all managed by the BMC SaaS if you're running on the SaaS version. The cell doesn't exist, but the equivalent event service is there, and that's being combined together with the event policy to carry out the same functionalities that you used to do with the cell earlier. The petrol agent functionality remains the same. It's the same thing. You have the KM, you can also have the custom KM to be used in a different way. They are all supported. Infrastructure policies will be split into monitoring policies and alarm policies. And if remember the global thresholds, now those was a single page where you define the global threshold. So for that, we have a different way to use it, and that will be converted into the alarm policy. We'll talk about this special aspect about the global threshold in the next slides. For the event classes and slots, yeah, they are still there. The terminology remains the same, and there are REST calls also supported to make this happen. For the event adapter and the MSend, there is an equivalent functionality which is created, and there is also REST call support, and including the intelligent integration to make the event integration happening from the various third parties. Now, I'm on the terminology comparison, where the MRL policies, the one that was written in the TSOM, they are converted into the event policies. The managed devices will be called as the agents. The dynamic baseline remains the same. For the dashboards, it's converted into the Helix dashboard, which is a different technology. It's a Grafana, a very, very popular feature, rich UI, and supporting multiple data sources, which are available in the data lake. The ITDA, IT data analytics, that's been converted into the Helix log analytics. The synthetic transaction monitoring, that's being turned into the synthetic KM with various functionalities being added, where you can also play back the data where it was being captured from the synthetic KM. There is a development happening on that. The operator actions, rules calling script, and outbound integration, they are treated in two different ways: the intelligent automation and the iPaaS using the two-way integration. For the groups which were there in the TSOM, the groups exist on the BHOM, and they'll be mainly used to publish that group as a service. And this diagram, I tried to combine the things that I just spoke, some part of that, and I wanted to consolidate them together to give you the whole picture about it. The gain visibility across silos is something where you have the open observability, including multiple data which is coming in, REST calls, petrol agent, II, they send all the observability data. It ingests the data together, and it's linked to the topology, which is done by the BMC discovery. And this gives you a better visibility. And many times when you analyze the events, then it's going to reduce the possibility of going into the war rooms to find out what's going wrong. The dynamic service modeling and the correlation, and this improves your service visibility, because like I said, that you get the event, it's just not the event, but you get a relation between the events where you can find out what's going wrong. This is again visualized by using the event noise reduction and the root cause analysis supported by the artificial intelligence and the machine learning algorithms that we had. Let's say once you do the event analysis and find out the root cause, there is a self-healing that you can do using the intelligent automation remediation. And for each service which is defined on the AIOps, for each service, you can get a better visibility of the service, what was happening in the past, what's the probability of the problem happening in the future. That's the event predictions. And using these all capabilities, you can reduce your MTTI, MTTR, then you can scale your application, and that the way you can have the continuous service optimization on it. The situation is the one where multiple events, they combine together on a single service, where you call it a situation and get the overall visibility for the event to happen. And that summary is being enhanced by using the Helix GPT, which is a fully AI/ML driven feature, where you get the textual representation of all the event analysis. Now, next step forward, I'll be going to the migration process. In the migration defined into 6 blocks. The first one, I'll call it as a understand TSOM environment, where we'll be running few reports, filling up the questionnaire to get the data about the environment. And once that's done, then identify the various tools, links, documentation, and the blogs needed for doing the migration. The third one would be evaluate if it's a SaaS versus on-prem. Now, there are some considerations on this part which we'll be going through the slides in detail, which selection you should be doing for the implementation. And documentation about all those aspects will go into the migration plan. It will be validated on the QA environment. First, make sure the things are met with the expectation and the acceptance. Make the tweaks around this part, revisit some of the parts when you are validating on the QA, and then move it on the production. The first one is understand the TSOM environment. So for that, we have this health check tool, a tool which was created for the purpose of generating the report to understand your environment. Yeah, that would be an automated way to fetch up the data around the monitoring that you're doing. The second one would be complete the migration evaluation. I have not put the data on this, but there is a link and that will be sharing where he has the complete questionnaire published on the BMC documentation. When you answer this question, you yourself will realize a few data which you were not aware or may not be documented in your networking diagram, that those consideration also needs to be made for doing the migration. And then third one would be identify data which will be easier to recreate than the migrate. We'll take a few examples of what kind of data you can think of which will be easier to recreate. Talking about the first one, the two-side health check tool. Now, some of the data I fetch it from the report. It's not all of them, but take example of the agent counts, the versions of the petrol agent that you need to do the migration, and the ports where it's running, the list of the solutions which is being monitored. Now this is important because it has a version and you get the overall count of the distribution of the solutions and the game distributed, so that you can identify what would be the main observability that you want to set that up once you do the migration or during the migration phase, and what are your critical monitoring expectation. So this report will give you the easiness to make that decision of and this define the acceptance for the migration. It also gives the components which are already integrated with the TSPS, the names of the remote devices, and the operating system for the petrol agents, because we also need to consider the operating system to support the new petrol agent versions. So this report will help you into making those decisions. And this is a sample questionnaire, which is taken from the migration scoping questionnaire. This is available on the official BMC documentation link. So some of the data like the version of the TSOM, the agent details, the device details, those can be fetched from the health check tool report, which I just explained in the previous slide. And the other data for the customer conversation, that will be your network diagram or any specific architectural details that needs to be considered for the migration. This will be customer conversation, and you need to fetch that up from your networking diagram and fill up the questionnaire. Defining how many event rules that you need to migrate, that is an important aspect, because as per the experience that we had, the time for migrating the cell event rules, that's the most one. Considering for the which data that may be better to do it manually rather than doing the migration. The one of the example would be for the regulate and the propagate rules for the cell. The reason is that in BHOM we don't have the cell and we don't have the remote cells, which was useful for the propagation and the regulation. But these things needs to get created into the event policy. So you have the equivalent functionality available by doing directly do it via the event policies. I'll move to the step 2 now. We spoke about the health check tool report and the considerations on that part. The second step in the migration would be to understand the various migration tools available and the blocks related to that. Some of the tools that we can use for the migration is the PCM to policy conversion tool, and the policy migration tool, the tools to set the agent connection before you do the agent migration, and the event migration utility. The related blogs and the webinars will be sharing these links along the documentation at the end part. Step 3, I'll pause here. This is the important one. Where you want to go? You want to go with the SaaS support, or you want to stay with the on-prem? Now consider that when you go for the SaaS, the whole management of the infrastructure, the whole Kubernetes infrastructure, the storage and everything will be done by BMC. Whereas in the on-prem version, if you choose to go so, then we have a very good set of documentation and the deployments and the automation made available if you want to go with this option, where you can have your own Kubernetes cluster set up and your cloud infrastructure set up to do this. And remember, means you will have to manage it by yourself in that case for the infrastructure around that part. And for the SaaS version, the monthly pushes, the patches and the release, they are done automatically and very regularly. So this would be done by the BMC, so BMC Helix, and it's not will be not your responsibility. In case of on-prem, we will be pushing those details once it's deployed on the SaaS. We'll be pushing on the on-prem version that you need to do download and then deploy it the same way you used to do for the TSOM patches and the hotfixes and the releases. The same thing we will have to manage with the on-prem. The areas of focus in case of SaaS, it will be mainly on the business configuration and the uses one, the innovation around that part. On-prem, the focus is still there, but also you need to consider the management of your infrastructure. You also have the maintenance and the management for that. So it's both in that case. So when you define the migration plan, one consideration would be the upgrading the petrol agents. Note down this version. We'll be also sharing the doc that you need to upgrade to 22.1.002 or its latest patch level if you are not TLS enabled. Because otherwise the same, the older version to this, and if it's not TLS enabled, it will not be able to communicate with the BMC Helix. Whereas if it's TLS enabled, then you can upgrade to any latest version of the petrol agent and then migrate that to BHOM. You need to identify the various event management classes, rules, and policies that needs to be migrated, the dashboards and the reports that you want to do the migration, the various CMA policies, the integrations you need to note it down, which need to get migrated to BMC Helix. Then identify the user groups and the permissions and the acceptance use cases which are needed. Once you do this part, then you have the migration plan. I also consider the feature from the petrol agent, which is the tagging, so that you can define it in the truth identifier, and then you can track it down during the migration. What are those petrol agents which are coming from the TSOM, and once that is done, then you can change the tags so that it's easier for you to do the migration. So when you have a more 5,000, 6,000 agent, then this can be a good option to track the agents which are being migrated. And keep these options available as a checklist so that you have the progress being tracked as and when the migration process actually starts and it works. And also keep the acceptance criteria. Say, for example, for one of the agent, then define that this metrics is started collecting and those events start is coming in. So this will be the good example for doing the acceptance criteria. Identify what doesn't needs to be migrated. Now, we took few example, and there will be few more coming in where what conversion that you want to would actually do, and which thing you can skip it, and which thing doesn't needs to be migrated or recreate or take out the things which are really obsolete and which are no more needed in your observability. You do not have to spend efforts on defining the migration strategy for that. And when you go with the simulation, or when you try the various migration process, then note down these challenges and the next mitigation strategy, what can be done to address those challenges. We will be sharing this link about the event migration utility, its capability and shortcomings, and also for the policy migration utility. For the migration considerations, for the alternatives I was talking about, the Sentry Studio 9.x game, that will not be working with the BHOM approach, and you'll have to use the Studio X game. If you're using the Sentry, then make sure you have that conversation happening with the Sentry and go through the documentation around this part about the Studio X monitoring solution from Sentry software. Smart reporting. There is no equivalent smart reporting based on the crystal or the business objects. It's not there in the BHOM. The BHOM makes use of the Grafana, which is the latest technology with the rich UI-based application. Very good tool, and it gives the rapid dashboarding. It's very easy to use also, and there are various ways you can integrate that with the Helix platform. You can make use of the events, you can make use of the matrices, and there are REST calls available along with the platform data, which you can fetch and combine everything together to give a very meaningful dashboards and the reporting techniques. We also publish the community, and there is a marketplace available where we keep on updating and add the more dashboards as coming from the users' feedback. For the global thresholds, it's not out of the box migration there. So you need to get the global threshold from the custom URL using the JSP report list.jsp, fetch it from the TSOM server individually, put it on the flat file, and maybe put that into the Excel later, and then define the thresholds into the BMC Helix in its alarm policy. For the unsupported KM, which is the Unix and the HP, use the platform-specific GUI solution for monitoring, and also you can use the remote monitoring for the same purpose. For the custom KM, if you have running any custom KM, then you can have the BMC support case created to import your custom solutions on this part. Step 5 is for validating on QA. So assume now you have created all your migration plan. You have the constructs created where you know what things that you want to migrate, which are your important one, and which you have to have an alternate solution. Define this thing on your QA plan. Do the migration sampling for some of the data. Define the timelines so that you can define the schedule for each migration task, and the checklist as per your process of your organization and IT infrastructure. And depending on how it goes, you can tweak the migration plan, fine tune it further. And once everything is concluded on the QA, then migrate to the production. For the integrations part, which were there on the TSOM and talking with the BMC Helix, in two-site monitoring, the third party was already used to be done by the KMs or the products which were integrating directly with on the TSOM, on the TSPs. The alternative for that would be to do via the intelligent integration in BMC Helix. And as I told, it supports multiple third-party open sources software where you can have a direct streaming happening for the topologies, event, and metric, all three types of data. They can stream it directly to the Helix. And note that this was not possible in terms of TSOM. That's one of the value that we are adding with the BHOM AIOps migration. The intelligent integration makes use of the various third parties. Currently, it's more than 40. The list is still growing. The AWS, Prometheus, all the open sources observability tool that we are there, it's providing support for that. And the configuration is very easy. The basic information is needed for making the connection that needs to be entered, and it shows the streaming screen about the events and the metrics. The second thing about the self-healing and making the automation would be the intelligent automation. It provides the support for the trouble ticketing, the TMF compliance, the PSR which was there on the true side, the proactive service resolution, the blackout policies, and various third party you can connect is for the automation, like the Ansible, and it also provides a generic REST connector where you can give the REST connection point and have your automation written on your server to respond to the REST service call. I'm going to the consideration screen. EUM, synthetic transactions. This is done via the KM in BHOM. The Citrix application monitoring, which was there in the app visibility. There is no mitigation plan, but most of the things that you wanted to do with it should be able to complete it via the synthetic may or using the open REST calls. The cell remote action, since cell is not there, Then the remote actions that needs to be managed via the intelligent automation. You need to define the event criteria intelligent automation and define what type of action you want to do. The similar way, but it's done via the intelligent automation. And for the impact manager, this is has the equivalent functionality in AIOps. They are splitted into that, and more enhanced versions, more enhanced features are there in the AIOps. Let's say if you if you are not able to find out any supported observability application where you want to send out the data, then in that case, the BMC Helix, the BHOM AIOps, they give the open REST call. A very well documented REST calls. They are all published in the official documentation where you can have your third-party application send out the data, and it has to be following the construct which is needed for this REST call, so that you can build the whole service model on that, and define the necessary events and rules, so that you can bring any kind of observability monitoring which is not available in II or Petrol agent. You can do it with this way using the custom metric. Now, if I give one example, the host name on this, when you send out the metric, that should match up with the source host name in the event so that they can relate it. This is a small example. There are, but the very detailed documentation is already published. The other addition that we did on the BHOM AIOps is the support for the hotel. If you have some metrics and you want to fetch it by the hotel, then there is a direct integration now made it available. As long as the hotel receiver is able to fetch your observability data, then it can be integrated with the BHOM AIOps and send out that those traces to the application. This is an official documentation link that we'll be sharing for this part. Now, another thing is when you want to forward the event, which was one of the criteria in earlier Sail version also. So these kind of items, they can still do it via the intelligent automation, where you fetch the event which is generated in the application, and then it can forward that event to your custom application with the data which is needed to be provided. And this is done via the intelligent automation. I'll be going through the various tools which will be useful for you to do the migration. And those tools, the main reason for developing those tools was to reduce down all the laborious tasks that you were having. That was the main intention. So it will take down reduce the number of hours. If you want to do it all the things manually, it's definitely going to reduce down the time for maybe 75-80% of that. Those are the tools which are available with us. The first one is the PCM to policy conversion tool. If you are using the Petrol agent, the PCM Petrol configuration manager for doing the agent configuration, then you can use this tool to convert that into the CMA policy. It will convert that flat file export of the pconfig into the CMA policy, and then this CMA policy can be fed to the next tool, which is BHOM policy migrator, and that CMA policy will be converted into the BHOM understandable format, and it will be shown up on the UI under the monitoring policy. The third one is the administrator utility, and this is called BHOM admin. It has the multiple options. We'll see in the next slides what are the different options available in this administrator utility. The agent migration tool would be useful for disconnecting from the TSOM environment and start pointing that Petrol agent tool to the BHOM environment. And the last not the least, and this is the mostly used tool, is the event migration, is for converting the cell KB files into the BHOM policy files. And then later on, yeah, it converted into the BHOM policies. Also note that right now also, even if you don't want to directly start with the migration, you can still use this tool, the event migration utility, where you have the simulation option, and you can see that what all things can get migrated with the event migration utility and whatnot. That option is available. It's called simulation. The first one about the PCM to policy conversion tool. In this, we have these configuration files, the log monitoring, the process monitoring, or the service monitoring. Those kind of configuration files, along with the agent tool, they can get converted into the flat files for the CMA policies, and then later the TSOM policies created with this can be fed to the BHOM policy migration tool, and it will be converted into the Helix, the BHOM policy. The next one is the BHOM policy migration tool, where you can have the CMA monitoring content put into the flat file, get converted that into the monitoring policy directly on the UI, on the BHOM, and the agent and the server side thresholds. Those things will also get converted into the alarm policy. Like I said, that there is a separation between the monitoring and the alarm policy, which will be done via the BHOM migration tool. The QA to prod policy migration, that is exporting from your QA BHOM tenant to the production BHOM tenant, that can be also done using the BHOM policy migration, where it will consider the monitoring alarm and the blackout policies, the event policies, and also the BHOM monitoring groups. The second tool is the BHOM admin. It has the multiple options in it. That is for testing the connectivity to your BHOM tenant. You can have a tool executed on your petrol agent right now also to make a connection to the BMC Helix and see if the connection works out through. This will cover up the your proxies or any network firewall if it's there between the connection. Then you should be able to find out those problems right away. This is one more example. You can do it now also without waiting for actual migration plan to happen. You can do it now also. And then generate the BHOM petrol agent report. This utility run on the BHOM once the migration is done, and then you can get the petrol agent report. You can refresh the connection status of the petrol agent, then set the proxy account on the petrol agent. You can enable or disable the baselining for a metric in BHOM. Those items are done after the migration is done. And list the metrics with the baseline enabled, updating the petrol agent. This is available on the community, and it is provided on demand as and when the need happens. This particular tool, the BHOM agent migration tool, it's available on the communities, and for this, what happens behind the scene is it's update the pconfig variable for the petrol agents that you had, and updates that URL using the tenant URL for your Helix. And it updates the other pconfig value which are needed to change and point your petrol agent from TSOM to the BHOM. And this is also useful for the BHOM tenant to another BHOM tenant pointing. The same tool can be used for that. The event migration utility, that's a Java based one, and it has provided the user interface which takes the necessary input and the configuration. And once it's defined, it's able to migrate the suppression, enrichment, DDN, blackout, and notification closure, those policies, types of policies, into a BHOM. It has the simulation option also, and the actual execution. It generates the report at the very end. What are the things which can be migrated or which cannot be with the provided error details, which needs to be debugged later. If a certain migration doesn't happen, then what all things should be considered to get that migrated. For the EMU, there is an active development happening from BMC Helix. I'm listing some of the data that I could collect about the fixes which are recently made and which are in progress. This is an active development happening on the EMU. And once the webinar is done, we'll be also having the feedback sessions or the question and answer, where you can provide what things that you will be interested to happen in the future for the EMU or any of the migration tools. If you had input, we'll discuss about that. I'm listing a few of the bulleted points which came from the last discussion with the customers about the agent version. I want to highlight that one, that for the non-TLS, you need to upgrade the petrol agents to 22.1.0.0.2, and if it's TLS enabled, then then if it's TLS enabled, then you can upgrade to any of the latest version above the 22.1.0.0.2i. Make sure you run the health check tool, you have the access for it, so that you can run the tool in order to fetch the information of your TSOM environment. And if you have the custom KM, then start working on that. Do you really need those to be migrated for in your next observability, or are there any alternate solution available? because it can take some study and extra steps to have the custom KMs migrated. I'm listing some of the links we'll be sharing with you, the resources for needed for the migration tools. It will be listed here, all the links. Some of them also has the training videos created for usage of those tools. And also there are migration blocks. One of the aspects that I want to highlight is copying the certificate. For copying the certificate, you need some kind of automation. I'm talking about the certificate when the old petrol agents, which are using the TSOM, when they point it to the BHOM, even before you run the agent migration, you will have to copy the certificate from the BHOM to the agent side. And this would be one of the way to do it using the TSOM package deployment, a TSPS deployment package feature. You will be able to copy those certificates in there. And the second part would be when you do the agent upgrade itself, then you can copy down the BHOM certificate on the petrol agents. There is a MSend tool equivalent created for the BHOM, which we'll be sharing. It was earlier done in the Perl. Now it's also created into Python for a better scalability. The health check tool, we spoke about it. And this is the on-prem health check tool. Now, this is available official out of the box from the new deployment on the on-prem release, where you can run the environment. If you're using the BMC Helix on-prem, then you need to run this tool so that it will validate various aspects, which will assure that you can go for the deployment or not. Then there is important links about the BHOM documentation, the groups and access. You will be sharing the links related to that. And at this point, I covered the slide deck and the information which I wanted to share with you guys and discuss it.
Thank you, Nilesh. A lot to cover, and obviously we were very conscious when we were talking about the content we wanted to share here. We are planning to do further webinars. The content was just too vast. I think we could have kept you almost for a workshop and had you for a few hours. You've had quite a lot of questions in. Thank you to those that have put them in. Just firstly, the question that we've still got pending.
Okay, my another query is around, is there any plan of, because it came from actually two of the customers. They are asking like, can we migrate performance data, as you know, it's totally different database and the data structure at the BHOM side. Any such plans in future?
Performance data will not be you're talking about the history, right? The history of the metrics.
Yes.
There won't be plans.
Because there are a lot of audits happening and they need the historical data. Even though I gave them the workaround with the TrueSight smart reporting to extract reports from there after migrating, but still they insist like if there is a possibility of getting the graphs and everything at BHOM side. So
it's not available out of the box, but we have the REST API calls supported where you can inject the metric. So if it's a very particular thing that you want to get that done, then that is something you can customize, making use of the open REST calls we have published and insert those metrics in.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And I suggest for this particular, you can have a support case and track it down so that it can be taken up further. But there is a possibility, and it's just that it needs to be evaluated for your specific case.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. I think I'm
Thank
good.
you.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you. If you have any other questions, do pick up your hand. It's fine. You can speak to us live or put it in the Q&A. So we have another question. Will future release of event migration utilities support other type of rules like propagate rule? Ipster, I can see you're about to respond to that. Do you want to come off mute and answer that?
Yes, so propagate rule is not applicable in case of BHOM because we don't have cells anymore, right? As Nilesh had explained. So it will be not required in case of, there was one slide where Nilesh had explained there are some types of rule which we won't be needing when we migrate to BHOM. So it's necessary to evaluate what should be migrated and what should not be considered for BHOM migration.
Thank you. Vincius, you had a question. It said, if Discovery is also being migrated to Helix Discovery, what should be migrated first, Discovery or TSOM?
I think you generally migrate Discovery first with BHOM. BHOM always works with a Discovery instance. Whether you're going to be licensed for Discovery or not, it's always part of the platform and part of the data lake for BHOM. So if you are going to have that migration, it can be go with migrating discovery first.
Okay, we've got a couple more minutes left. If there isn't anything further, just to recap, any of the content that's shared today, as Nilesh was going through there, all of the links, they will be provided because they're in the slideware. We will be sharing that out in hopefully the next 48 hours. You'll also get the recording. They do actually go up to our YouTube page, and I will also be sharing you our webinar page, which is where all of the BHOM content are. There will be a survey that will come out to you. It takes a few minutes to fill in, and it's mainly directly, so it comes back to me to prepare those questions, any potential content you want to put in the future. And I know, having spoken to Nilesh and the team today, we knew we couldn't cover lots of other topics, so we're very likely to be putting out further content, and I will use the attendance and registration for this event to let you know when that next comes. So thank you for joining, and thank you, Nilesh, for presenting. I know there was a lot to cover, and then also to Ipster and Charles for supporting and Anand the event. And I wish everyone a good rest of the day wherever it is for your time, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.